good news and really good news. Good news is we are going to finish up infancy today. And the really good news is, if all goes well, we're going to get out of here early.
Oh.
Yay! I appreciate that. I love it. I love that you want to be here so much. It makes me feel so good. Okay, so let's review very quickly. We start everything off by saying that the primary task for parents is to keep the children
Healthy
Oh,
and safe.
wow, look at you on a Friday getting excited about that. We're going to keep the children healthy and safe. We were reminded the other day that children are not tabula rasa, which means what?
Blank slate.
Okay. Instead, they are what?
Sensory bundles.
Bundle of behavioral
Yeah.
systems that are waiting to be activated.
There you go. Bundles of behavioral systems just ready to be activated. All right. So parents are going to promote that activation through the promotion of 3 specific types of development. What are those 3 types?
Physical, cognitive, social, emotional.
Physical, cognitive, and social emotional. Great job. We talked about physical and cognitive the other day. We're going to spend our time today talking about how parents promote social emotional development in infancy. We're going to look at a couple of things in particular. We're going to look at attachment, we're going to look at social caregiving, and we're going to look at the child's own temperament and how all of that interacts in this beautiful relationship to promote social emotional development. So let's start with attachment. Somebody remind me what our 4 attachment styles are.
Secure, anxious, avoidant, anxious, resistant, and disorganized.
Very good. Secure. Oh, N comes before the X. Anxious. Avoidant. Anxious. Resistant. And disorganized. All 3 of these last ones are what we would call insecure attachment. What is the most most common of these? Secure. Secure attachment is most common. Most of us are going to develop with a secure attachment to a caregiver. What is the most rare of all of these? Disorganized. Disorganized is most often related to what? And abuse. Yeah, maltreatment, right? Some kind of maltreatment is happening. Neglect, abuse. Okay, so when we think about social emotional promotion in the parent-child relationship, we are going to build upon what we talked about with the physical response and the cognitive response, that everything is going to be dependent upon that interaction and how parents are responding to things, right? And so in those responses to those laughs and those cries and those things that we talked about the other day, parents are building attachment. They're building some kind of attachment bond with their child, right? Healthy responses build secure attachments. It's the inconsistent and the unhealthy responses that build the insecure attachments. Okay? So we're looking for some consistency here when we talk about building that attachment bond. There are 4 phases to attachment which are important. 4 phases. Now, this is not the social caregiving piece, so don't put these in that blank, those blanks. This is something different. This is 4 phases to attachment. We got 4 types. These are 4 phases. Number 1, behavior is going to be reflexive. Infant behavior is going to be reflexive. Remember, we talked about that yesterday. The way that they enter the world and begin to experience things and process information is reflexive. It's through our senses. It's innate. And the infant is going to be seeking contact indiscriminately. In the very early hours, days, maybe even weeks, the infant does not care who touches it. Right? It hasn't processed who's who and what's what yet. So the infant is just seeking contact. If the infant is crying and wants to be held, it often doesn't really matter who is holding it in those early days and weeks. If the infant wants to be changed, it doesn't matter who is changing it, etc., right? So all of those responses that promote physical and cognitive development are also building blocks for promoting attachment bonds. So early on, phase 1, behavior is reflective, infant is seeking contact indiscriminately. Phase 2, the infant is learning to discriminate people based on physical characteristics. Phase 2 of attachment, the infant is learning to discriminate people based on physical characteristics. That does not just mean the way they look. It means the way that a person sounds, or the way that people smell, or the way that they feel, right? Sometimes even the way that they taste, right? They're going to develop that bond. We talk about breastfeeding as a physical, promotion of physical development, but also thinking about it as a promotion of a bond, right? You're going to recognize mom maybe easier than others. But they're also going to recognize other people based on their own physical characteristics. One of the reasons that I knew Josiah knew me, maybe even more than Lydia did, was that when Josiah was very, very tiny, he would always reach his arm up and he would just start stroking my goatee. And so I would hold him here, and his arm would just reflexively shoot up and start stroking that. And it's like, that's how he knew it was me. So, phase 2 of attachment, the infant is learning to discriminate people based on physical characteristics. Phase 3, the infants become clearly attached to their caregivers. In phase 3, they're going to know who it is that is providing that primary care for them, who it is that's changing them and feeding them and holding them when they're crying and laughing with them and playing with them and all of the things. They're going to really begin to pick up on, oh, these people are consistent. They're consistent. So they go from wanting contact indiscriminately, we don't necessarily care who is touching, just touch, to, oh, these people are the ones that are doing it consistently. I recognize them. I recognize their smell. I recognize their look, their sound, their feel. I recognize all of those things. They also take care of my needs. They're the ones that clean me and feed me and all of those types of things. So they start to become clearly attached to the caregivers. And then phase 4 of attachment is infants learn to cope with separation from their attachment figures. Infants learn to cope with separation from their attachment figures. Now you might think, wait, how does that show attachment? Well, once you think all the way back to a couple weeks ago when we were talking about attachment theory and kind of introducing the thought, and we introduced the idea of the strange situation, a research tool that's been used over and over and over again to study this and to study attachment styles. The idea that when children are in a new place with new experience, they are able to use their caregiver as a base, but also to explore the world around them. And they will notice if the caregiver is gone, but will be more easily consoled and able to regulate themselves in that moment, and also be excited and have another set of emotion when the caregiver returns. and also be able to regulate themselves in that moment as well. And so the best example of that is to think, for us, many of us, is to think about dropping off a child at Sunday school, right? Just because a child doesn't cry when they come into that new experience doesn't mean that they are more securely attached than one who does cry. In fact, we would expect a child to cry, especially a younger infant, when they are being dropped off. That is actually a sign of a secure attachment. They notice that caregiver is not going to be there or is not there anymore, and they're not sure how to deal with that. If the attachment is secure, they're going to be consoled, they're going to regulate, and within a few minutes, they'll begin to explore that new world, okay? All right, so let's review the 4 phases of attachment in building this bond. Phase number 1, infant behavior is what? Reflexive. Infant behavior is reflexive. And the infant is seeking contact how? Indiscriminately, which means what? Doesn't matter who. Just give me attention, right? Second phase of attachment. Infants are learning to do what?
Discriminate people.
Yeah, discriminate people based on what? Physical characteristics, right? Which could include any of the characteristics that we sense with our 5 senses. I'm not going to ask you those again because y'all struggle with those. Right? So, no basic questions like that. The third phase, infants become clearly what? Attached to whom? A caregiver. And I think that's important. We're not just building attachments with anybody. We're building that attachment bond with the people that are providing us with care. Right? The ones that are providing us with care. And then the 4th phase, infants are able to learn to do what with their attachment figures?
Cope with separation.
Cope with separation. And if they cry when mama leaves the room, does that mean they are insecurely attached? No. In fact, that would be a sign of secure attachment. So we are looking for those things. In fact, it's probably true that both infant and caregiver are going to experience some kind of separation anxiety in those early years, right? Dropping off the infant for Bible class, leaving the infant with a grandparent so that they can have a date night, right? There's going to be anxiety on both parts, and that's normal, but we're able to regulate well, which makes that attachment secure. Okay, part of building attachment and building into those 4 phases is something that we call social caregiving. Something that we call social caregiving. So what we're going to do for just a little bit is we're going to explore ways that we lean in to social caregiving. What I want you to know right from the get-go is that the things that we're going to talk about, the ways that we might practice social caregiving, are directly related to this, because this is teaching this, okay? Social caregiving, how we engage the infants, is really going to be teaching attachment and moving infants through those 4 phases. So, there are unique ways in which we practice social caregiving. One way is through turn-taking. Turn-taking. Turn-taking simply means that we are going to alternate turns in an interaction. We're going to alternate turns in an interaction. Another way that we might engage in social caregiving is through synchrony. Synchrony. Synchrony is when both individuals, caregiver and infant, are attuned to the same thing. They are giving attention to the same thing. They are responsive to each other, and maybe even are sharing some emotion. So, turn-taking and synchrony. Another way that we engage social caregiving is through reciprocity. Reciprocity. This is when the actions of each individual complement each other and even maybe become similar to each other. Yes, I can say that one. Reciprocity is when the individual's actions complement each other and become similar to each other. So they're supportive of each other. I'm sorry, not complement each other. They are supportive of each other and become similar to each other. And then the fourth way that we might engage in social caregiving is through complementarity. And this is where caregiver and infant actions do complement each other. This is where one individual's actions may actually complete the action or thought of the other. And so we begin to build complementarity. Now, here's what I want you to do for a few minutes in your groups. It would be very simple for me to give you little examples of interactions that you could have that illustrate turn-taking, synchrony, reciprocity, and complementarity. But I want to see, all of you said the other day that you have had time with infants, so I want to see where your brain goes with this. So what I want you to do is I want you to come up with a list of 4 little interactive games. They can be very simple. We're not talking like Monopoly here or do any of you play board games? There's some pretty complex board games out there right now. My favorite is Villainous. You ever play Villainous? You should play Villainous. It's good. It's complex. Too complex for infants, right? Simple games, simple interactions. I want you to come up with a list of 4 simple interaction games that you could play with an infant to engage in turn-taking, synchrony, reciprocity, complementarity. So 1 for each. That makes sense? All right, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this, and then we will share with the rest of the group. Go. After it's swallowed.
But like, yeah, hide and seek. I would play. You take. Is that for
Oh, yeah.
And like, yeah, because they.
No, I think that's great.
They have to see you first.
Her or we say something, and then like we kind of do the same thing. Dialogue, like it's
No, you're so
You're
right.
doing
This is
turn-taking
my 8-year-old.
next. Yeah. Which is still going to be important, because we're going to talk about play when we get into the older age groups, but just think about infancy.
I don't know if this is right or not, but just thinking out loud.
It could
There have been infants or if I've seen.
That's not true either, remember? They talk.
Noises.
They communicate.
We're babbling.
Just there you go, there you go.
Doing it together.
Yeah.
I don't know if that encourages speech.
Okay, I agree.
There is like a,
So individual, and then they have to support each other in counseling. And so you could do that like in the.
I see that.
Just like,
Yeah. You
and
just
then
grab
their
your
baby, you know, and
They
they
start clapping.
it's like a coffee pot and a little coffee
Yeah.
thing.
I
And
also
they show the
think
baby how to do it, and then the baby like pushes it down.
so kind of like, cause I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
I definitely,
It's like
actions of the individual.
they hand it to each other. I don't even
It's
know.
like, it's very visual, but
Yes.
also like hands
No,
on.
like you just put it in the coffee pot and then say, okay,
This is also just hand it down. I don't know,
like what games
Uh,
you guys are doing is they the coffee pot is and then
Wait, so what is
Keurig.
it? Sorry.
Have you seen a video like that? Okay. Well, the parent, like they're holding their baby in the morning and the parents.
so the actions of each individual are.
How old is it? Like,
We're talking the first 0 to
I feel like we
I don't
could,
know, 1, 18.
put the emotions on that one and do something.
Late infancy, they're pushing.
I don't know.
they put it in and then they go.
Interesting.
So you know what I'm saying?
I've seen this video, I don't know. what
Touch Josiah.
I don't know what it's called. I guess I could just give that example, but I kind of just like, I'll just say coffee pot.
Pod.
Cause I'm coffee pot example and all those, okay.
Like they might not smash it out the whole way, obviously, because they're teeny little babies.
But like they're kind of getting like the idea of
And
what
it's
to
fun,
do.
it's fun for them to hit.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Conversation
Um,
flow and entertainment. We're also
What action do you take?
I can't do anything else.
emotion.
What's that?
So
What is it?
we might
They make like funny faces. Oh, yeah. Or
something.
Yes, I do.
This one
I know.
says.
I definitely like this.
Baby's favorite.
Bubbly.
So, like that one for this one, is that what
And
you're
yours.
saying?
Okay, that should be reciprocity. Okay.
Okay. Or just that in general.
In general.
Yeah.
Get back to that.
Okay.
Okay, those are some like things too.
Makes sense?
Okay, so now we're gonna do companies, yeah, like.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Remember, reciprocity is about support. Complementarity is about complementing and completing. So you can remember comms, the comm words, right?
It's hard to play games with babies. They don't know anything.
We're just looking at what you're calling complementarity.
Like, so like,
Yeah.
Blow bubbles.
We're concerned about the future
Okay.
parents and
This
this
one
group
is
right
called
here.
clappity clap. Clappity clap.
It's a genius thing.
Uh,
We are at 2 minutes left.
Oh, that's more fun.
Rather than like, it's like a
Can that, I don't.
So,
Okay,
right.
it's like her, and like, I'm gonna tell you,
Yeah,
yes,
I
but
would-
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Okay, first things first, I can do something.
No, I that's I definitely hear another track.
Okay, clappity clap.
Return to said like peekaboo games.
Okay, so kind of like, wait.
And like you're both entertained.
Okay. Is it's complete.
So it's like that would be the tasting, right? Or what you're saying?
Like, well, guys, it says eventually, so.
It is hard, because like I know what you're saying,
Yes.
and I definitely think it's like a really good example, but I don't know if it necessarily goes with
complementary.
So do you want to take for, I mean, that, like, for the right
Okay.
I guess
so
I
that's
just
kind
think
of
like
like
a
a little.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
I feel like that, when we actually complement each other.
Thank you.
So, one
All right.
actually says
30 seconds left.
Wooden.
Get your reporters ready to report.
I don't know.
We're struggling with a lot.
I'm nervous.
It's okay to struggle.
Infants do
I don't
nothing.
know.
Yeah, girl, I can talk about it.
Meet each other.
Right, like.
10 seconds.
What it can do to compete or like an action. Without.
All right. Collect your thoughts. Reporters, get ready. Which group would like to share their games first?
We can,
You gotta go.
Okay.
You do your thing.
we're just gonna go.
I've kind of labeled you all as different groups.
What are we?
Huh?
What are we?
We've got the not quite sure group. We've got the good thing we got an education major group. And we got the we don't like kids group.
Oh, that's it.
I heard your voice too. All they do is go blah.
You didn't say that. But Sadie said she doesn't like playing games with them, so she doesn't
That was the
like
very first thing I heard when
them.
you
She doesn't
started
like
saying
them.
All right,
Okay,
y'all go.
so, first up on the stage, we have Peekaboo. So with Peekaboo, we're gonna be like Peekaboo, and then they're gonna do it back to us. So we're
Okay.
taking turns.
Okay.
And then secondly, we have this little piggy, because we're kind of on the same page, but we're kind of taking the leads with the piggies and singing the song, and they can kind of join in if they want to. We might have some sad emotions when only one piggy gets roast beef together, you know?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we go to Monkey See, Monkey Do, or Simon Says, but easy version, because it's infants. And,
And what is that, Bill?
Bill?
What is that? Reciprocity. Okay.
Yes, because we're gonna do something and we're gonna try to get them to do the same thing.
Okay.
And then, we had, oh, the big wooden puzzle for complementarity.
Yes.
Because-
3 months olds are gonna be great at that.
Well, you know, sometimes it's just fun to like have it and be shoving it in, but we're helping them and we're all trying to get to the same thing. We're really complimenting each other by trying to complete the puzzle.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Hey, that's a good job. Good job. Give them a hand. That's good. Good games. Well thought out. Next. Bill.
So for turn taking, we did like blocks in a line. So, one person, like the caregiver is going to start and they're gonna put the block in the line, and then the infant is going to put the block in the, like, next spot, and you just keep swapping turns.
Okay.
And then for synchrony, we didn't really exactly know what to do, but, we said like maybe we could have like a little, like, puppet show, and like,
Okay.
we're both like watching it and like doing things together of like the puppets, but like it's more like us doing it.
Yeah.
And then reciprocity, we did peekaboo with emotions. So like there's a certain point in time whenever infants can actually like react and like copy your facials. So then you can do peekaboo and you can smile, and then it'll be like they smile back, and so then it's kind of like that give and take. And then we didn't really get one for complementarity because we ran out of time.
Okay. All right. Good job. Give them a hand.
And for turn taking, we said peekaboo. For the next one, yep, that one. We said like speech encouragement, so kind of like if they're like babbling to you, like just do it back and just kind of do that. And then we have the coffee pot example for like the next one. You like put it down and then you kind of like show them to like hit the lid, and then obviously they're not gonna probably push it down all the way because they're not strong enough to do that, but they like do it back. And then we don't really have anything for the last one.
Okay.
So we can
Good job. Give them a hand as well. I was blown away. I should have taught Josiah how to put my pods in the carrier early on. That would have been fantastic. Then my coffee will be waiting for me in the morning. Since he's the first one up, I may go home and teach him today. All right, good job. Here's the secret behind all of the games that you just created, because you were well thought out in these. The secret is that really most of the things you described are actually accomplishing all four of these at one time. And so when you start to think about, oh, how do I do complementarity? You're doing that, right? You're building that into the relationship. Let's think about the game Peekaboo. That's one that several of you mentioned, right? In one sense, we could use Peekaboo for turn taking, right? Especially as the infant gets older, right? In that first year, and you do that, and then they're likely to repeat it, and they're gonna do that. Or, even when they're younger, you do that, and then they're gonna respond, right? That's the turn taking. You can also, I love that what you guys said about doing different faces. That's one of my favorites to do with my kids, like, you know, and see if they respond back with the face. So then the synchronous action is maybe the emotion that shared or the face that's made, right? And we're learning to make faces, those types of things. Reciprocity is support. For Peekaboo, what's the supportive action when I go Peekaboo? What's the supportive action? Yeah, it's the response. If the child, as Maggie says, just goes, then I'm gonna be like, okay, that did not support this game at all. Done with that, right? But if Peekaboo and they're like, hee hee hee, right? That's a responsive action. That supports. Or they might go, ah, and we've taught them about fear, right? So there's great things there. And then as we continue to build on, and we think about complementarity, complementing and completing, we will see them begin to, maybe they initiate, or maybe we cover the face, and before we can do anything, they say, Peekaboo, right? And they've kind of figured it out, and we're complimenting each other, and before long, they're initiating. So the key is, the secret is that the things that you described were all great games, and probably hit on multiple ones of these social caregiving techniques at one time. It's all about response. It's all about response. Now, here's the other side of the coin when we think about social emotional development. We have this whole idea here where we are thinking about attachment. We're thinking about building attachment, moving children through those four phases, and we know that caretakers play a role in that through social caregiving. But what's really fascinating is that the children, the infant, plays a role in that as well through their own temperament. And there are three child temperaments that are infant temperaments that we recognize. The first that we would talk about is difficult. The second is easy. The third is slow to warm up. Now, here's what we mean by these. The difficult child temperament, this is going to be a child who, the child themselves are just more, personality-wise, they are more pulled to being upset by things. They may have a strong attachment bond with their parent, but they just don't want to be away from them. And so their new situations are just not going to be good for them. They are going to be difficult, and they're probably going to maintain difficulty the entire time. Right? Easy temperament children are probably those more laid back infants that are just like, they're the dream infants for Sunday school, right? You bring them in, and they might go, Mom, it's gone. All right, they're gone. What are we doing now? Bring me some goldfish, right? Those types of things. Slow to warm up are gonna be kind of that middle ground temperament where they really want home base. They want the security of the caregiver, but they also want to explore, and so they take a little bit of time to figure out that they can still explore if home base isn't around, right? And so it may take them a minute to begin to build some kind of bonds with non-caregivers, right? And so child temperament is going to matter as well. Now here's what the beautiful part of all of this is as we start with infancy, and we're going to see this interaction throughout the rest of our lives between parents and children, and that is that, as you can see on the board here, this is a two-way interaction. It's a two-way interaction. Parents are responding to infants who are responding to parents who are responding to infants who are responding to parents, and it goes on and on and on as they move from infancy to toddlerhood to childhood to adolescence to adulthood. It's this beautiful, symmetrical, two-way interaction that is dependent upon response. So, within the parent-child relationship, as we parent infants, parents play a role in promoting physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional development of the child, but children play a role in that as well. Does all of that make sense? Good? Okay. So that leads us to the last point on your sheet, which is to talk about how all of this works best. The promotion of development in infants works best when parents share roles and compensate for working hours by engaging in quality childcare. We know parents are working, we know parents are busy, we know all of that happens, but parents, when they are there, can engage in quality childcare. And not one parent should be the parent. Not one caregiver should be the caregiver. Optimally, that is a role that is shared. It's a role that is shared. Now, what does that mean for single parent homes? Are we saying that they can't parent well? No, we're not saying that at all. We are likely saying that even in single parent homes, the opportunity is there for children to build bonds with a non-biological caregiver, right? Or a non-parent caregiver. And so maybe we could change the name of our class from parent-child relations to caregiver-child relations, right? Because what's important in this development is not necessarily the who, right? But the quality of the interactions and the attention paid to response from both caregiver and child. All right, any questions? Any comments? You're dismissed early. Have a great weekend.